Hello and welcome to Starting Points, where one thing leads to another. I've got some examples for you today. In the last video, we started looking at stars and the way to define what's a star and what's a sun, and so I just wanted to start with that. While every sun is a star, not every star is a sun, because many stars do not have planets orbiting them. And a star is a sun only if it has a planetary system. Some stars are so far away we haven't been able to detect if there is a planet orbiting them. Here's a photo from November 14th, 1953, the Adler Planetarium. And I don't know if it will show up at all, but here's part of the sun, huge. And crossing it is this little black shadow dot. And that dot is Mercury. And so between the Earth and the Sun. And I got me thinking about this puzzle of the unknown. And I mean, it's only been a short while since we've added Pluto to the list of planets in the solar system of the Earth. And I don't think we have the kinds of cameras that can reach way out into the galaxy and actually, but maybe we do. I don't know. But it got me thinking about puzzles, and as soon as I did that, I thought of Martin Gardner and his fondness of puzzles. He wrote a book called Space Puzzles. Curious questions and answers, that's good, about the solar system. He wrote other books. I'm going to share some of them with you this time. Perplexing puzzles and tantalizing teasers. Maybe a little emphasis on perplexing and teasers. And he wrote a series of books on various mathematical puzzles and diversions that were published in a magazine called Scientific American. And then someone had the idea that these are well responded, people are writing in about and enjoying, and that they would put a number of those together and form a book. And this was the first book that I ever bought by Martin Gardner, Mathematical Puzzles and Diversions. Now, in this book, we've got things about hexaflexagons, tic-tac-toe, and here's some notes of a lesson I did once with some students. They had great focus in trying to solve these things, and Tower of Hanoi, the Tower of Hanoi. Now, the original description of the toy called it a simplified version of a mythical Tower of Brahma in a temple in the Indian city of Benares. By simplified, it means that it had 8 rings that you were to move. The one rule is you cannot put one of them on top of a smaller sized one. And so you start off like this. Let's say you moved there. It didn't really matter. And with this, you know you can't move there. But there's a place for you. But, oh, this next one. Now, it can't go to either one of those places. Ah, wait a minute. This could move on top of that, and then we're all set now. Okay, now we're going. Uh-oh. This is a little bit more difficult. It can't go there, can't go there. Well, let me try this thing I just did. Let me move this here. This can't go on top of that, but it could come here. Let's do that. And that would clear up but this could come here. And then I could get this off. And now, so there's a little strategy and a little rhythm to doing this. Well, when I was looking at this in the book before sharing it with you, it says that this tower, the Tower of Brahma, consists of 64 discs of gold, now in the process of being transformed by the temple priests. Before they complete their task, it was said, the temple will crumble into dust and the world will vanish in a clap of thunder. The disappearance of the world may be questioned, but there is little doubt about the crumbling of the temple. The formula 2 to the 64th power, because you're going to have 64 of these, which doesn't seem like much more than 8. I mean, it's 8 times 8, but yields a 20-digit number. 20 digits in it. Assuming that the priests work night and day, moving one disc every second, it would take them thousands of millions of years to finish the job. Whoa. Now, at the same time I got this book, I got this book because this had been published. It's the second Scientific American book of mathematical puzzles and diversions. And in this second book, there are many topics in both the books, but here's one on the Soma cube. And there are 7 pieces in a Soma cube. It's going to form a cube that's 3 by 3 by 3, or 3 times 3 times 3, or 27 cubes. So there are 6 unique ones with 4 cubes, and then one that's got 3 cubes to it. Now, I had this and used it in the class. I got a number of sets of them, put them in a plastic bag inside a little tub, and students had a page like this of their own. In with getting the puzzle was a little booklet from Scientific American from the Mathematical Games and Puzzles 2 by Martin Gardner, Soma Cube. And a little bit there about the Soma cube. And you can make lots of things with it. You can make a pyramid. You can make skyscrapers of several kinds. Staircase that goes up and down the other side. A memorial, which proved to be impossible. So you couldn't make that one. Though it's one that looked like it might be possible. Apartment blocks, high and low, and a high and low too. This one goes into the middle. This one only in the connects to the outside piece there. So one of the pieces is going inside the other. A triple cube, airplane, crystal dog, sitting, a robot, a bed, a different tower, a bathtub, a chair, a snake, tunnel, gallows, the well with steps, sofa, cornerstone, monument, well, they had great fun working on these. What else is in that second book? Well, there's mazes. We had a lot of fun with mazes. We had a lot of fun with the Soma cube, magic squares, and origami. Those are just a few of the topics that I used with students. Now, in the Soma cube was something that was visualized by Pete Hine, and he was a Danish poet. And actually, here we've had something from India, and here's something from a man in Denmark. It made me think that mathematics is probably a language that people in many countries can understand. The language of numbers and things that you can do with puzzles and other things. So it's something that actually ties peoples of the world together a bit. Pete Hine got a vision of this, and as I say, he was a Danish poet, and he wrote a couple of books, Grooks, or Rooks, too, and I would, with one school where we had a lot of parent involvement. This was an elementary school through grade 7 initially, and the parents were asked to come to a meeting with the teacher at the first of the year, but at other occasions during the year, these meetings were scheduled, and it was nice to get for them to get to know me better and me to get to know them better, and having them help with various things like orienteering or obviously field trip to some place. So there was a really good vibe, and we had 2 classes. The classes were split classes. Instead of having a, let's say, 7th grade class and a 6th grade class, they had one class had 7th graders and 6th graders, and the other class had 7th graders and 6th graders. And the plus for that was, for the teacher the following year, they would have half their class, more or less, of students that they already knew as capable. And I think it just transitioned really well for students to have that. In other words, if I had a 4 or 5 class, the next year my 4th graders would become my 5th graders, and I'd get new students. But these could help others know some of the routines. And anyway, that's off beside the point. I put this up on the wall. TTT. Put up in a place where it's easy to see the cryptic admonition meant TTT. Admonishment. When you feel how depressingly slowly you climb, it's well to remember that things take time. T, T, T. And I had parents come back and tell me at times that, they still remembered that it sort of helped relieve some pressure that they had, that their child would, not be progressing well enough, or that they needed to push them more, or they found that in time the child discovered what they were interested in and keen in, and went on to do something with it. Well, one last book. Aha! I should have said, aha! Look, one last book. Aha! Insight by Martin Gardner. And this is a great book. I'll just give you a sort of a sense of it, of the sort of things it is. There's only a couple of pages, little cartoon, and then goes on to the puzzles and problems. And like this one, the Crooked Acrobat. Really, was dividing the chores. So that's a sense of it, and I think it's a sort of book that you might find a lot of enjoyment in it if you like to think along these aha lines. Well, thanks for joining me. Until next week, bye for now.